see the Browns, in action to get excited and say, hey, I want to go to one of the games someday. So, it's not like, I know the Browns obviously have a great football tradition, which has obviously survived the ultimately bad thing that could happen to any team, but it's still, going to be an ongoing struggle to reach the younger generation and make Browns fans out of them too. Of course, hopefully, eventually that has to happen on the field, but until that happens on the field, you've got to get as many people of as many ages excited about the Browns as possible, and I think that's what they're doing here.
Yeah, and you know what? A little bit of just a small little trivia. You may not have known this. While it's the first time the Indians are taking Family Day out of Cleveland since the Browns, since 1946 in the franchise's history, they've played 19 actual preseason games in Akron, but the Browns have not been to Akron since September of 1973 for an exhibition game that drew 30,751 fans. So it's been since 1973 since the Browns have taken anything to Akron there. But that used to be, in the early decades of the Browns, a regular preseason stop.
Well, that's my hometown, Akron. And of course, back then, Akron was a much bigger city and a much more of a thriving industrial city. I mean, I know the population has gone down in Cleveland, but it's also gone down in Akron. Akron used to be a much bigger deal than it is now. So I can imagine that they would, get a lot of people excited about seeing the Browns back then. And it's good to see them kind of returning to those roots.
I love it too. I like the tie-ins. I look through these press releases and I catch the fine print, like the PNC debit card people get in early for Family Day by using their card to get. It's like little perks to tie in all of these different things here. But man, a week away from training camp starting. I mentioned it today. It actually starts today for the New York Jets. They start their camp. But the Browns begin July 26th. Man, we are a week away from this thing. And then we're talking InfoCision Stadium. That's August 2nd. I mean, we are in the home stretch for Browns football to begin. And, I'll tell you, I saw in the chat room there, and I know that the Browns have a lot of work to do. They're digging their way up from a 4-12 season with a new front office and a new head coach. And anybody who has their head in the clouds as far as, oh man, the Browns are going to be competing for the Super Bowl this season. I'm not trying to be the guy that says they can't, because as we've seen in the NFL, any team can turn themselves around overnight. But I saw Bruce in the chat say, anybody who's excited about the Browns needs to get a life. I disagree. I do believe that this is a very exciting offseason for the Browns, and I'm excited. I'm definitely excited to see the Browns get out there and play, and I do believe that the Browns are on the path of success. I do. I think that things that were done in this offseason, I'm very excited, and the ones that I'm most curious about are some of the ones that I wasn't really into, like Johnny Football. I'm very curious to see when the talking's done and the swans have all been deflated and we're out of the jack and the ace of spades. I want to see what he does on the football field. And a lot of that, I want to see this defense. I want to see Mike Pettin for the first time. Like, they have piqued my interest as far as putting together what they've done. Now I want to see if it pans out.
Well, that's the one thing we have. We have the hope. We really don't know what could happen, and it could be something good. I mean, last year was obviously very lousy. They've swept out everything and everyone bad about last year, and they brought in a whole new cast of characters. And you never know. It could work out very well. That's the exciting part. There's a chance that this team could come out and play very well and be competitive, win a few more games, at least get close to 500. I mean, I know that sounds pie in the sky, everything goes perfect, but it could happen. I mean, this could be an 8-8 team, especially if they play the style that they want to play, based around an opportunistic defense, controlling the ball on the ground, and not putting all your eggs into the passing game. As much as we love the passing game, it probably wouldn't behoove the Browns to base themselves on throwing the ball 55 times a game. That probably wouldn't work. So if they can corral this group of people and move them all in the right direction, this could be a much more interesting and exciting team. And that's, I think, what everybody is looking to see, just to see a glimmer of hope and an improved season, and maybe a sign that this team is ultimately heading in the right direction. And when you have a new coach and a new system and a new everything, really anything's possible.
Brother, it didn't behoove them to throw the ball 55 times a game last year either. Let me just throw that out there. I don't know what they were doing, but I'm with you there, and I agree. I think right where you said it, 500, that honestly, I'm not pie in the sky, man, but I do believe that if everything goes well and they put together a team here that plays well, I think that's about what you're looking at, which is most definitely that step in the right direction that you're looking for, And Bruce, he's being sarcastic in the chat room, but he's got a point. This is something that I'm looking out for. He says, well, he's a high school coach talking about Pettin, but that is something I'm very intrigued about because there's some glimmer of reality to that. That is what he started out as, and he is the first one to be an NFL head coach. Like, he is trailblazing in a way for the way that he got up there, so I do want to see if he's overmatched. Is he too much in the wrong spot? Is a coordinator where he peaks out at? Because as we know, a lot of guys are fantastic coordinators and they don't work as head coaches. And plus, Mike Pettin has kind of quickly flown through the coaching ranks. He didn't spend a whole lot of time here and then move up and spend a whole lot more time there. He's been one of those fast risers, which can be good, which means people are noticing him and he's a phenom, or it could be not so good. It could be like in a fast riser in the draft, and then you go, oh man, what were we thinking? So very curious to see if he's overmatched, and not only that, if he is, how much he relies on the support system. Can Mike Pettin be an effective NFL head coach? I think that may be the biggest question of all for the Browns.
Well, fortunately for Pettin, the bar has been set very, very low. You have Kaczynski, who lasted 1 year. You have Shermer, who passed very hardly at all. If he can even make it through 2 entire years, he'll look like Chuck Noll compared to everybody else.
You're right, though. I mean, the bar has been set incredibly low the last few years. And if I'm Mike Pettin, I'm telling myself that. I'm going, really, what do I have to lose here? Let's go. And I'm excited. Yeah. Like, I like the rah-rah aspect of him. And I really do like him defensively. I think he's a good defensive coordinator. I mean, he's definitely going to put some aggression in the Browns rushing the quarterback. But that does not always equate victory either, but I think with the improvements in the defensive backfield, that is one of the most underlooked aspects, I think, of this Browns offseason is the defensive backs. That they actually have a core, not just a guy and some backups, but they have a core of guys that can play the defensive back positions, the various positions, deeper than it's been in years. That is a true football observation, I think, where I'm most interested in seeing the Browns defense improve, because I think maybe, just maybe, if you can have a competent defensive backfield, Pettin's defense is going to get 50, 60, 70 sacks, and so then all of a sudden you really do have some bite in the defense. You couldn't do it before when you didn't have any depth in the defensive backfield. That's the key. I think that's what maybe gives this defense a real chance to be what it's thought to be and not just what the hype is.
Right, and you can see what their philosophy is when they went ahead and picked Justin Gilbert with a top 10 pick in the draft. That shows that what they like to do, what Pettin likes to do, is just mix things up and send 7 guys, not all at the same time, but send up to 7 guys after the quarterback and, count on those 4 defensive backs to do their job. And he puts a lot of trust in his defensive backs, and he turned the Bills loose last year, and they got 57 sacks. And I'd love to see us get that many sacks this year. But you have a situation where you can get people like Jabal Sheard, guys like Barkevius Mingo, play to their strengths and let them attack the quarterback from different angles. And say, I'm going to trust that Joe Hayden and Gilbert and Gibson and Widner are going to do their jobs back there. So they call it a high-risk, high-reward style. Hopefully there'll be a lot more rewards than risks, but you can see that putting Gilbert in that spot and with that big draft pick, that shows that he's going to trust those defensive backs and try to really make life tough on the opposing quarterback.
Yep, and that's one of the things I'm most intrigued with. And on the offensive side of the ball, really it's the wide receiver position. I mean, I believe this is not because it's what I want. I believe Hoyer starts the season. The Browns either play well behind him or at some point we see Manziel. I think there's only 2 ways that can go. So I'm not going nuts over the quarterback position right now, because I believe that it's a foregone conclusion the Hoyer starts unless Manziel goes nuts. And if he does, awesome. Then we'll talk about that later. But the wide receivers, no matter who the quarterback is, you got to have somebody to catch the ball. And there's so much uncertainty up in the air when it comes to the wide receivers. I mean, there's a lot of opportunity for these guys. But, I mean, when you've got a group of guys looking at an opportunity, that could mean that you've got a good group of guys, or that could mean that nobody can take the job. Like, that can be good or that can be bad. So I don't know how the wide receivers are going to shake out. I think Jordan Cameron's going to have to be leaned on a lot. I think that's my most worrisome thing offensively. I do believe they've addressed some spots. The offensive line, I think, is going to be better. We've talked about the running attack with that wide receiver, man. I don't know. I mean, yeah, you hope Miles Austin. You hope that, some of these guys, Hawkins, you hope that, I really do. I see the slot receiver is going to be an important piece. But you hope that the rest of these guys, can Anthony Armstrong do something? Can Travis Benjamin come back, or is he done? And if he does, do the Browns even want to use him as a wide receiver? There's a lot. That's the biggest question mark by far about this team. And if you don't answer it, then even behind a strong defense and a running game, 7-8 wins may be the absolute best you can do,
Right. This is one of those wide receivers, one of those positions where it's like, I don't really know what they're doing. If I was them, I would have shored up the wide receiver spot a lot more, especially with Josh Gordon potentially suspended. But they've done what they've done, and it's like they almost. It's not like they disrespect the wide receiver position, but they almost treat the wide receiver position like it's kind of a dime a dozen. Yeah, we can pick up a couple at the grocery store on the way home, and we'll be okay. And we look at this cast of characters and like, these guys were just sort of sitting here hanging around looking for a job, and we gave them one. It's like, are they really that good? If they were that good, wouldn't somebody else have taken them by now? And again, I hope they prove all of us wrong. I hope people like Austin and Burleson, and of course Hawkins, they went out, directly and got him, took him away from the Bengals with that unrestricted free agency. So, but again, are they going to take Cameron and let him play wide receiver a little bit more? It's hard to tell, because this is one of those ones where just looking at the way they've addressed the position, especially, people think back to the draft and say, oh, why didn't we get Sammy Watkins? That's the philosophy of this team. They value the cornerback position more than they value the wide receiver position. And this is another one of those things, like, we're just going to have to see how it pans out and see if maybe these guys can find a couple of diamonds in the rough, guys who can just get open and catch the ball.
We're at the point where the rubber meets the road, my man, because they're going to have to answer these questions for themselves, and we don't have to talk about them much longer. A week from tomorrow, the Browns start. I was actually misspoken at the beginning of the segment, by the way. It's not the Jets, it's the Bills who begin their camp today. They start training camp today, the Giants over the weekend, because they meet in the Hall of Fame game, so they get the extra week to start ahead of everybody else because they're going to have to play that first game ahead of everyone else. So I was misspoken. It wasn't the Jets. It's the Bills, Mike Pettine's former team, that have begun training camp, and they're the first team to kick things off for the 2014-2015 NFL season. It's upon us, Jeff. By the time you and I talk next week, we will have and you know what? I think the final domino will have fallen. They took care of the Hoyer situation. He's now been cleared. They cleared up the Jimmy Haslam situation $92 million later. Really, the last off-season domino that the Browns need to address before camp is how long is Josh Gordon's suspension going to be. Actually, I saw some reports that it's coming any day now. His final appeal will be done. So I think next Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, somewhere in the tail end of next week, we will have some final clarification on Josh Gordon, so we'll probably have that to talk about. And then, like I said, a week from tomorrow, training camp officially begins. Fans will be coming in, getting their first glimpse of this year's Dog Pound Dogs. We'll see if it's going to be a Dog Pound season or if it's just going to go to the dogs. We get the first glimpse next Saturday.
I can't wait. The excitement is building. I think everybody is really just starving for something good and something positive to happen for this team. You same old team that was 4-12 last year. You got to say that it's not the same team. But I mentioned people who are doing better. Travis Benjamin says that he's totally ready to go with no restrictions, which is kind of a surprise to me. And he talked about him before. I would love to see them not let him catch passes and just let him concentrate on returns and just let him just concentrate on that because he was so good last year in the brief time we saw him. I would love to see Benjamin really blow everybody's doors off and maybe win a couple games for this team just as a return specialist. I hope he's right. I hope